Watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Coming up in the next hour. Winter session of Indian Parliament comes to an end amid protest and counter-protests. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to visit Kuwait on 21st and 22nd December. First Indian Prime Minister to the Gulf country. The visit comes in 43 years. US government shutdown looms large as Trump-backed spending deal fails in the House. Top US diplomats in Damascus to meet new Syrian rulers. IMF says it can help Syria rebuild. Both houses of Indian Parliament were adjourned sine die today. Lok Sabha was adjourned sine die amid protest by opposition and treasury benches over the alleged insult to B.R. Ambedkar and directions by Speaker Om Birla to members against holding demonstration at any gate of Parliament.
माननीय सदस्यगण, मैं आप सभी से पुनः आग्रह करता हूं कि संसद की गरिमा मर्यादा बनाए सबकी सामूहिक जिम्मेदारी है। संसद भवन परिसर में किसी भी द्वार पर किसी भी तरह का धरना प्रदर्शन करना उचित नहीं है।
As the proceedings in Lok Sabha started, Speaker called Law Minister Arjun Ram Meghwal to present a resolution for setting up a joint committee of Parliament to examine the bills related to One Nation, One Election. In the upper house, Union Law Minister moved the motion to nominate 12 members from Rajya Sabha into the Joint Parliamentary Committee. The motion was passed. The chairman briefed the House on the session's productivity stands at just over 40%, which is 43 hours and 27 minutes of effective functioning. The chairman then adjourned the House sine die. And DD India correspondent Anil Thomas joins us live from the Parliament for more. Joining us from the newsroom. As the winter session concludes, Anil, what would you say were the key takeaways? One nation, one election took centre stage and the JPC was formed.
Well, good afternoon, Shubhendu. Well, very much on expected lines. You know, the big takeaways I would say is that glorious discussion on the 75 years of the Constitution drafting that took place in the upper house and the lower house. And I think the treasury benches, the government using this opportunity well to give a point-by-point rebuttal on all that opposition has been, all the noise that opposition has been creating outside and inside Parliament with regards to issues that they wanted discussion on. Along with that, the JPC, the constitution of the JPC and the timeline that's been given for the first report to be presented, along with the important bills like the National Banking Amendment Bill, the Oil Fields Amendment Bill that Hardeep Singh Puri, Union Petroleum Minister, managed to pass, are all, big achievements that this government has managed to do, especially in this winter session. Though in the Rajya Sabha, the productivity has been close to 40%. But I would say all in all, getting the bill on JPC, getting the bill introduced itself is a big win. And for the opposition, yes, the opposition looked divided when the session began. But as the session concludes, I think the opposition has got a unison voice when it comes to the issues that they want to address. And I think that's what would be something that the opposition feels that they have managed to get something from this session of Parliament. But all in all, if one takes a look at the session, it's been productive both for the Treasury as well as for the opposition benches. Okay, Anil, and besides the legislative business, the session would also be remembered for a string of protests and counter-protests by the members. Exactly, Kuwait. That's been the low point of this particular 4 weeks of deliberations that we've seen in the Parliament. Remember, Parliament is all about discussions, deliberations, bills being passed, not about disruptions. Disruptions, fine, inside Parliament. Along with that, if you have protests outside Parliament, protests that break into an elite couple, and FIRs being lodged, I think the citadel of democracy has hit a new low. And I think that's where the parliamentarians need to ponder. I was speaking to many parliamentarians, both from the government and from the opposition. The opposition felt that, they have let down the people but then it's too late to, repent over it. In the end, 4 weeks, not much of business transactions purely in terms of how this particular house could have been functioned. But yes, lots to ponder for. And I think the next session of Parliament, that's the budget session of Parliament, that's something that's going to be crucial. And I think if the parliamentarians speak a lesson or two from this session, maybe it would do a world of good for the people watching and for the parliamentarians, especially when it comes to transactions in both houses of Parliament.
Anil, thank you. And in fact, if you can also give us updates on what is to look forward to now that the session concludes, number of bills such as the One Nation, One Election, it goes to the JPC. What is to look forward to as far as the legislative business in the country is concerned?
Was in the Lok Sabha 27 members, Raj Sabha 12 members being constituted. So altogether 39 members being constituted there in the JPC. The JPC is going to sit down, listen to the merits, demerits of the One Nation, One Election bill, the Constitution Amendment 129 that needs to come into play. And I think the last week and the first day of the last week in the budget session of Parliament, we're going to see the report being presented in Parliament. So it's going to be a long drawn meetings and deliberations that continue on the merits and demerits of JPC, on the demerits of One Nation, One Election. Remember, 2024 elections, 37,000 crore rupees were spent on the elections, which is close to 0.02% of your total budget. So that's what the opposition has time and been claiming. It's been an attack on the federal structure of India. And the government has been also very vociferous when it comes to vouching on the merits of One Nation, One Election when it comes to bringing down cost. But we'll have to wait and what does the JPC report bring to the table? That's when this bill will once again be presented in the House, and we're going to see a full round of discussions.
Anil, thank you for joining us with those updates from the Parliament. Moving on, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be on a 2-day visit to Kuwait starting Saturday, marking the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to the country in over 4 decades. The visit is set to cement the historic ties between the two countries and strengthen the cultural, trade and people-to-people connect between India and Kuwait. The Indian diaspora in Kuwait is elated at the news of Prime Minister Modi's historic visit to the country. It's a conversation by DD India correspondent Akshay Dongare with several prominent members of Indian diaspora who are awaiting the arrival of Prime Minister Modi to the country.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is making a historic visit to Kuwait. The relation between the two countries have been historically very strong, but it is going to be a huge impetus to the relation between the two countries with this historic visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in over 40 years.
After Modi ji took charge, our respect in Kuwait and I think worldwide has improved. Indian passport is now one of the very leading passports. Earlier people were trying to immigrate to America, Canada. I think now it's going to reverse immigration that started. So we are in Kuwait, we are very proud of our Indian passport, and Kuwaitis respect us a lot. They respect the Indians a lot.
Already the impact is there when he is sitting in India. But once he comes here, our respect, our Indians as Indians and the India's respect will increase more in Kuwait especially and internationally also.
Everybody individual out of 1.1 million Indians and Kuwaitis which are connected, because it's a host country. They all are very, very excited to meet him, to greet him, and everybody say, Modi hai, to mumkin hai. Because the kind of work he has done in India, the kind of connect he has with all the Indians in Kuwait, with all the community, irrespective of any community, this is unparalleled and unmatchable.
This visit hopefully will bring and take bilateral relations to a new level. We've been waiting for this for a long time. We are aware that some developments may take place that will help the community as a whole, and we are really excited about it, and I think his visit will create some new impetus with the new government in Kuwait as well.
Modi, 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 Modi hai to mumkin hai.
Modi hai to mumkin hai.
Modi hai to mumkin hai is what the Indian community here has to say, the Indian diaspora, and as the experts have also been saying that this is the community that forms the backbone of also the Kuwaiti society as well. So clearly excitement brewing up before the visit of the Indian Prime Minister here in the country. With camera person Shiva, I'm Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And now my colleague Akshay Dongare is joining us live from Kuwait City. Akshay, if you could give us some insights into the highlights of India-Kuwait relations and what is expected during this visit by Prime Minister Modi.
Well, Shubhendu, it's great to be here in Kuwait City ahead of the Prime Minister's arrival because, it's after a decade, it's after a wait of about 4 decades, the Indian diaspora here will once again welcome an Indian Prime Minister. It was, in fact, 43 years back, the last Indian Prime Minister had arrived in Kuwait. In fact, Kuwait being a very important country, not just for India's energy supplies, but also for its trade relations. In fact, Kuwait is the 6th largest supplier of crude oil to India, 4th largest supplier of LPG. The investment by the Kuwait Investment Authority in India has crossed $10 billion mark. In fact, the Indian exports to Kuwait have also, for the first time ever, reached a $2 billion mark as well. So the trades have been reaching new heights. The relations have been improving. They have been strengthening under the leadership and foreign policy of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But this visit is historic in many sense because Prime Minister has visited most of the Gulf nations, most of the countries in the region. But Kuwait was one country which was not visited by the Prime Minister. In fact, in the last 4 decades, and this visit and this decision that has been taken by Prime Minister Narendra Modi is historic in many sense because it is going to strengthen and cement the relation between the two countries, not just in energy sector but in other sectors like pharmaceutical supplies and other sectors like trade, in culture and the diaspora of we cannot comprehend the kind of impact the Indian diaspora has here in the country. In fact, Indians form the largest expat community with over 1 million members, forming a living bridge between the two countries. So it is in fact a great atmosphere here in Kuwait right now ahead of the arrival of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Right, Akshay. In fact, we just saw your conversation with the elated members of the Indian diaspora. You mentioned the Indian expatriate community in Kuwait is the largest foreign community. What is the importance of the visit of the Prime Minister from the perspective of people-to-people ties?
Well, if just imagine that a large community of Indian origin living in a country which has not been visited by their leader in over 4 decades. The Indian community here has been feeling that pinch that no Indian Prime Minister has visited the country in over 4 decades. It's over 1 million people strong community here, and that is what they have been feeling. That while the connection and the relation between the two countries are great, the Kuwaiti society values the Indian expatriate community here in the country, but the relations have a lot of potential to grow, not just in terms of trade, but in terms of other aspects as well, including traditions, including historic ties that the two countries share. In fact, if you look back about 50 to 60 years back, before 1960, Indian rupee was a legal tender here. Even before the discovery of oil and before the oil trade between the two countries has been strong. In fact, Kuwaiti society has been exporting Arabian horses, pearls, other items like dates to India, and have been importing items like timber, other items that they used to require like spices, like other clothes, textiles. So the trade has been going well from times immemorial between the two countries. But in the last 50 years, the trade could have reached new heights. That is what the expat community here feels, and there is a lot of potential to grow the relation and the trade between the two countries. And this visit by the Prime Minister once again to the country is going to fill that vacuum, and that is what the expat community here feels, that the trade and other relations can reach new heights between the two countries with this visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Kuwait.
Akshay, thank you for joining us with those updates from Kuwait City. And India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is on a 3-day visit to Mauritius. This is the first high-level engagement between the two sides after formation of the new government in the island nation led by Dr. Naveen Chandra Ramgoolam. The visit reflects the priority that India attaches to its relations with Mauritius under the Sagar Vision, Africa Forward policy and commitment to Global South. India and Mauritius share age-old ties rooted in shared history, culture, tradition, encompasses cooperation across several sectors. The visit will further strengthen the special India-Mauritius ties. India's President Draupadi Murmu attended the President's Colours presentation at the College of Defence Management in Hyderabad on Friday to recognise the institution's exceptional contribution to national defence. As the ceremony's chief guest, President Murmu emphasised the need for the armed forces to continuously adapt to modern warfare challenges. She stressed the importance of innovation in military training to maintain readiness. The President also released a commemorative postal stamp cover and a medallion.
India's defence capabilities at the global level reflect both its strength and forward-looking vision. By focusing on self-reliance, technological advancement and strategic collaborations, India is not only securing its borders but also contributing to global peace and stability. As we move forward, India's defence sector should continue to evolve and adapt, thereby ensuring that the nation remains a source of strength, resilience and cooperation in an increasingly interconnected and complex world.
And still to come on DT India News Hour. European Union leaders reaffirm support for Ukraine ahead of the second Trump term. Nigeria school fair stampede kills 35 children.
Pollution of all types across the globe is a huge problem. But what is the solution to this? Does it require individual efforts, community action, or state interference? Let's take a look at some of the possibilities, challenges and opportunities.
They have to segregate their waste, manage their organic waste within their premises as far as possible. They have to hand over the rest of the waste, the residual waste, to the authorized waste collector.
When the local administration saw what I had done, it decided to build the drainage system you see here, connecting the whole area to it.
Trees are our lifesavers. They give us oxygen, and it's unfair to harm them by hammering iron nails into them just for the sake of ads.
Welcome back. You're watching DT India News Hour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Russian President Vladimir Putin emphasized that Russia needs long-term peace and not a ceasefire in Ukraine on Thursday. At his annual press conference,
2022, which was scuppered by the British Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson. And apparently that was actually just one of 3 deals that Moscow and Kiev signed, with Kiev each time then tearing it up.
Meanwhile, 27 European Union leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday to reaffirm support for Ukraine ahead of the second Trump term. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attended the summit, called on Donald Trump to join forces with Europe to help save Ukraine after the conflict ends. The plea came amid concerns that the NATO skeptic US President-elect might undermine Kiev's efforts by reducing American support for this conflict.
I think that President Trump is a strong man, and I want very much to have him on our side. For me, it's very important. I want to discuss with him more details about this war. I think it's very important because he was not in this war, because he was not the president. It's understandable. And I want to share with him more details.
Zelensky added that European security guarantees in a frozen conflict would not be enough for Ukraine that aspires to join the transatlantic military alliance, NATO.
We must understand with you that we cannot live with a frozen conflict. When it comes to a ceasefire in any conflict, in any war, people know what will happen after, how it will all end. We need to know what tomorrow is in order to make a ceasefire today. Otherwise, you are going to create a frozen conflict, and that's it. And that's why Ukraine needs security guarantees, a strong position of Ukraine and security guarantees. Of course, Ukraine wants the war to end.
Meanwhile, European Union announced an additional 30 billion euros of financial support to Ukraine in 2025 after meeting with EU leaders in Brussels.
We will implement the 15 sanctions package against Russia we approved this week This package closes loopholes and limits circumvention and especially targets the so-called shadow fleet. Second, we have already delivered about 130 billion euros of financial support, and we will deliver an additional 30 billion euro in 2025.
Let's turn to news on Syria. European Union has opened the door for sanctions relief on Syria after Assad's fall, but without providing a specific timeline. The leaders of the European Union agreed on Thursday on key principles they will follow to normalize ties with Syria. In their joint conclusions, the heads of state and government called for an inclusive and Syrian-led political process that will guarantee the country's territorial integrity, national unity, protection of all religious and ethnic minorities, and respect for human rights.
We also discussed the issue of Syrians returning home. The situation on the ground remains very volatile. We're working very closely with the UNHCR. It is good that the UNHCR has access in the whole country of Syria. And one thing is very clear: with the support of the UNHCR, all returns must be voluntary, safe, and dignified.
Syria's de facto leader Ahmed al-Shara has offered a conciliatory tone, saying the Western countries needed to lift sanctions as Syria prepares for a transitional period. Shara leads the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS group that swept Assad from power early this month, ending the family's 5-decade iron-fisted rule.
We must deal with the Syrian issue in line with current events. These current events require the lifting of all sanctions because these sanctions were placed on Syria due to the regime that was ruling Syria and had committed all these crimes. So it makes no sense to convict the torturer and the victim at the same time. These sanctions must be lifted, then we will be able to implement our programs for growth and reform in the country.
Meanwhile, top diplomats from the Biden administration in the US are in Damascus on Friday to meet the new Syrian authorities led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS. The State Department spokesperson said that this is the first in-person official meeting between Washington and Syria's de facto new rulers. The visit comes as Western governments are gradually opening channels to HTS and its leader Ahmed al-Shara and start debating whether or not to remove the terrorist designation on the group. The US delegation's travel follows contacts with France and Britain in recent days. In a surprise announcement, the US Defense Department said the number of American troops have doubled in Syria, an increase that predates the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime this month. The Pentagon spokesperson said United States currently has approximately 2,000 troops in Syria, more than double the previously disclosed number of about 900. He added that additional troops are considered temporary forces that had been sent to counter Islamic State terrorist mission.
Just very recently, I was made aware of the fact that, hey, maybe there's more forces than just a small number, or what would normally be considered, around the 900 range. So we asked to look into it. Got those numbers today, significantly higher than 900, which is again why we wanted to let you know. Now, those forces, what they've been doing is all focused on the Defeat ISIS mission.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday called on the international community to support Syria in achieving long-sought peace and stability. The UN chief said political transition in the country must be led by Syrians and for all Syrians. Besides, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) expressed readiness to help Syria meet its financial needs in these moments of transition. IMF Director of Communications, Julie Kozak, said the fund is monitoring the situation in the country closely. She expressed hope that the country can now begin to address its deep humanitarian and social economic challenges and to begin the rehabilitation of the Syrian economy.
In terms of the assessment right now, the situation on the ground is indeed fluid. It's too early to make an economic assessment. We are closely monitoring the situation, and we stand ready to support the international community's efforts to assist Syria's reconstruction as needed and when conditions allow.
On to some other stories. A stampede at a school fun fair in the southwestern Nigerian city of Ibadan has killed 35 children, seriously injured 6 others. The incident occurred at an Islamic high school where a large crowd had gathered for a family event. Emergency services, including medical personnel, ambulances, were immediately dispatched to the scene. Security forces were also deployed to control the situation and prevent further casualties. 8 persons have been arrested, including the main sponsor of the event. Oyo State Deputy Governor Beo Laval said the government will dig deeper into the incident as a probe has been opened into the tragic stampede.
From inquiries, immediate inquiries that I have made, the security agencies said they were not contacted at all, the police, but the resultant effect of this very careless act is the huge death that we have recorded, unfortunately, and unavoidably too.
Nigerian President Bola Tinubu on Thursday expressed profound sadness, offered his heartfelt condolences to the grieving families over the tragic incident. And still to come on DD India News Hour. US government headed for a shutdown. We talk about what that means. US Deputy National Security Advisor John Fina has raised alarm on Pakistan's burgeoning long-range ballistic missile capabilities.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Our top stories. Winter session of Indian Parliament comes to an end amid protests and counter-protests. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to visit Kuwait on 21st and 22nd December. First Indian Prime Minister to visit the Gulf country in 43 years. US government shutdown looms large as Trump-backed spending deal fails in the House. The US House of Representatives on Thursday overwhelmingly rejected a Republican-led funding bill aimed at averting a government shutdown. The federal agencies are due to run out of cash on Friday night and begin closing down at the weekend. Government shutdown looms in the United States after the House of Representatives failed to pass a revised short-term spending bill endorsed by President-elect Donald Trump. The bill needed a two-thirds majority in the House to sail through, but lawmakers rejected it with 174 in support and 235 against. The rejection comes just a day before the federal government is set to run out of cash. If lawmakers fail to extend that deadline, US government will begin a partial shutdown that would interrupt funding for everything from border enforcement to national perks and cut off paychecks for more than 2 million federal workers. The bill, which resembled a previous version that Trump and Musk had criticized, included provisions to fund the government until March, when Trump will officially take office and Republicans will control both chambers of Congress. Earlier, Trump urged Republicans and Democrats in the Congress to vote for a newly unveiled stopgap funding bill to avoid partial government shutdown. In a post on social media, Donald Trump expressed enthusiasm for the agreement, stating success in Washington. But dozens of debt hawks in Republican ranks, unhappy about allowing the national debt to rise unchecked for half of Trump's term, rebelled against their own leadership to sink the package. Speaker of the House, Representative Mike Johnson, has been facing criticism from all sides for his handling of the negotiations, and his Speaker's gavel looks likely to be under threat when he stands for re-election in January. However, Johnson expressed hope that the bill will be passed on Friday night so that it can be sent to the Senate, although the party leadership offered no clear path forward, telling the reporters they would have to meet to discuss a Plan C.
I hope that this vote passes tonight. We will send it to the Senate. We will extend funding, and we'll come back, and we will have the America First agenda come in roaring in January for the American people. Thank you so much.
Funding the government is always fraught, and lawmakers are under pressure this time around because they failed to agree on full-year budgets for 2025 despite months of negotiations. Bureau Report, DD India. And for more on this story, joining us is Professor Swaran Singh from School of International Studies, JNU. Good afternoon and welcome, sir. How do you interpret this political logjam over the short-term spending plan in the US?
Thank you, Shubhendu. I think it does come a little bit like a surprise in terms of defiance of Republican representatives against their own president. Though there was so much excitement about both Senate and House potentially becoming Republican controlled, and presidency of course also being with President Donald Trump of the Republican Party. Let me quickly say that in United States the government funds various programs including the entire budget, which also involves raising of the budget, and it is the legislature, it is the US Congress that determines the limit or as to how much the debt can be raised by the executive branch of the government. Now, already there is about 133% of American US GDP, which is the limit that was set in last June 2023, and that limit was suspended to be effective till 1st January of 2025, and that's where the concern is. Now, since the presidency is being taken over by President Donald Trump, he was of course suggesting that again ceiling could be lifted so that the government can continue to raise debt and continue to fund various programs. Let me also quickly mention that this is not for the first time. There are 5 to 6 major episodes in history, recent history in fact, where the US Congress had shown this kind of a tussle, but invariably in the end accepting and helping the government to continue to raise.
Professor Singh, I actually want to ask you about that. Why does the most powerful economy in the world so frequently face the risk of government shutdowns?
I think it's more to do, Shivandhu, with the division of powers in terms of legislature versus executive and judiciary, where legislature does want to audit and oversee the kind of spending that has to be allowed. Otherwise, there are even have been occasions when the suspension of government funding went into 2 to 3 weeks, and then of course debt ceiling was raised. Second point important to understand that sometimes the country that is able to raise debt way beyond its own total economic size is also a reflection of global confidence in that economy. So Japan, for example, has much more. Japan, I think, has about 235% of their GDP as their debt, and the United States has now reached about 133%. That, in that sense, also reflects the credibility of a country's economy, where the debtors, the countries that are willing to sort of give that debt are willing to give that debt to, or institutions that are willing to give that debt to that nation are willing to give that nation. So it's not a matter of economic crisis in that sense. It's much more in terms of the let's say tussle sometime between the parties controlling the legislature versus the party controlling presidency. But as I said, the surprise was that even some of the Republicans, I'm told 30 Republican representatives have also voted against raising of that ceiling, and that seems to be something intriguing.
Right. On that point, Professor Singh, we understand US government is in a phase of transition. What does this possible shutdown mean for the outgoing President Joe Biden and the incoming President-elect Donald Trump?
Looking at the track record of such tussles, I assume that it's possible that in next 24 hours some solution could be possible. And assuming that if that solution is not possible now, but maybe several weeks down the line, as we have seen in some of the cases before, that would impact the mood of inauguration of President Donald Trump, who will be taking over White House on 20th of January. And since this ceiling was suspended until 1st of January 2025, so Americans would begin that new year with, that question being raised on their salaries, on various programs, many programs on national security, social security, healthcare, and so on, are likely to be impacted. In that sense, it's going to be a bit of a psychological thing, which means that the mood of inauguration may be impacted. And of course, I have not seen any case when it created major crisis other than 2 to 3 weeks in worst case scenario of government shutdown, as they usually say about it, where funding is no longer available to be committed. But it's not something that day-to-day work will come to a halt. It's not like that. So I think it's primarily either the House of Representatives will vote on Friday night and send it to Senate for approval, or it's possible that it might drag 2 to 3 weeks and in that sense impact the New Year mood in United States at large.
Right, and many are pointing at the Democrats, especially if the role of Elon Musk in this shutdown drama. They say that he appears to have almost disproportionate influence over President-elect Donald Trump.
That indeed, Shubhendu, is a debate in media across many sectors, including some of the interactions of international leaders, conversations on phone with other world leaders, where Elon Musk has emerged as a very, very significant influence in the presidency going to be of President Donald Trump. But that's a prerogative of American presidents. I mean, they are not bound by, in terms of making choices. You have seen he's already set up his team, which has people from all backgrounds. So in that sense, it's prerogative of the president who he wants to assign what responsibility, except that if it is the official position, like Elon Musk will be the co-chair of Department of Efficiency, which is a new department being created, those may need to be kind of endorsed by the Senate. But if the Senate is going to be supported by Republicans, I don't think that is going to be a major issue. But this kind of example of 30 Republicans also voting against something that President Donald Trump wanted to see happening before his inauguration, or happening as soon as possible, is something that would raise some questions as to what happens, as to how enthusiastic are the congressmen as far as the various programs and propositions and nominees of President Donald Trump are.
And so finally, if we were to briefly look ahead at what the political and economic landscape of United States is likely to look like early next year, there'll be a new president, the Republicans are going to control the Senate and the House as well. How would US be transformed in that sense from what is happening now?
I think it's definitely seen a gradual redemption after pandemic period of crisis. So there has been a slightly gradual incremental betterment of growth rates, for example. But issues of inflation, unemployment are not completely out of kind of concern. In some sectors, in some areas, exports have also shown dipping in some of the quarters. So I think the bigger picture is that it's not in any dire situation, but the progression is having its own slow pace and hiccups. And in that sense, the way President Donald Trump wanted to come with a bang in that sense to do new things and make America great again kind of platform that he's come on, would see that he will have to really push it really hard to make sure that that kind of momentum can be potentially built. At this stage, I think it's going to be really slow pace growth, and some sectors will continue to be matter of concern.
Right, Professor Swaran Singh, appreciate you joining us on the News Hour and sharing your perspective. In other news, Georgia's appeals court has disqualified Atlanta prosecutor Fani Willis from the prosecuting President-elect Donald Trump and his allies in the 2020 election case. In a 2-1 ruling, the court cited her romantic relationship with the lawyer she had hired to assist with the prosecution, raising concern about conflict of interest. This case was one of 4 criminal prosecutions Trump faced following his 2020 presidential re-election loss. US Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner has raised alarm on Pakistan's burgeoning long-range ballistic missile capabilities. He says the nuclear-armed Pakistan's ballistic missile capabilities eventually could allow it to strike targets well beyond South Asia, making it an emerging threat to the United States. Speaking a day after Washington announced a new round of sanctions related to Pakistan's ballistic missile development program, including for the first time against the state-run defense agency that oversees the program. He said the number of nuclear-armed states with missiles that can reach the US homeland is very small and they tend to be adversarial. Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath has said that the decision on foreign research vessels visiting Sri Lanka will be taken on the recommendation of a committee. While answering a question at a press conference held in Colombo today on President Dasanaike's recent visit to India, he mentioned a committee would be constituted to consider the matter, which would prepare a framework on the visit of foreign research vessels to the country.
Not only the Chinese ships, research ships, all research ships, regarding all research ships, we will appoint a new committee to prepare a national policy regarding research vessels. According to that committee's report, we will prepare the new SOPs, and using that SOP, we will take that decision. We will not give our land detrimental to India or our region. That is our stand. In that scenario, we will take that decision according to our special committee's report.
India is celebrating the 61st Foundation Day of the Sahastra Seema Bal, Central Armed Police Force, at Frontier Headquarters in West Bengal, Siliguri. On the occasion, Union Home Minister Amit Shah attended the parade ceremony and the inauguration of newly constructed residential complex of Border Guarding Force at ICP Agartala and Petropol. He also paid tributes to the personnel who lost their lives in the line of duty. The force remains vigilant in preventing illegal movements along the border and takes strict measures to curb unlawful activities on the Nepal-Bhutan border. Still to come on DD India News Hour. India to host Para Athletics World Championship next year for the first time in New Delhi. Australia announces squad for the Boxing Day Test match against India.
Pollution of all types across the globe is a huge problem. But what is the solution to this? Does it require individual?
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Updates from the domestic markets in a volatile session. Benchmark indices Nifty and Sensex traded in negative today. The BSE Sensex fell nearly 1,100 points. The latest data that is coming in from the day's high amid post-Fed jitters. The Sensex was down 758 points to 78,460. Nifty was down 213 points at 23,734. The indices have extended their decline to 5 days after IT and realty stocks dented sentiment in the market. The sharp fall in technology stocks comes despite Accenture reporting better than expected first quarter earnings in the United States. On the other hand, metal and oil and gas stocks bucked the trend. European shares were on course to post their worst week in 3 months on Friday. The pan-European stock 600 index fell 0.8% at about 8:12 GMT, trading at its lowest in nearly a month. All the major European subsectors were in the red. Investors are awaiting US inflation data later in the day for hints on the pace of rate cuts next year. Since Monday this week, Europe's biggest car maker has been stuck in wage negotiations with a major trade union in Germany over its cost-cutting plan. Joining us for more is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Chiponda, what is the latest in the matter?
Thanks for having me. Well, this is the 5th round of talks, and negotiators from Volkswagen and the trade union IG Metall have spent more than 60 hours in talks this week alone. And on Thursday, there were media reports that the two parties could be closer to an agreement. But at the end of the day, both Volkswagen and the trade union said they hadn't reached one. Now, news agency Reuters has reported that they are negotiating job security and the future of factories here in Germany. And other reports yesterday said that it appears that factory closures in Germany could be prevented. So it does look like progress is being made. And now talks are coming down to the wire. And if an agreement isn't reached, workers may go on strike in January. And that would, of course, only add to VW's woes. Like other major European car makers, it has been struggling amid rising competition from Chinese auto players and dwindling car sales here in Europe.
A little more on how the rest of the automobile industry is responding.
Well, the latest figures show that European car registrations declined 1.9% in November compared to the same period last year. And that was mainly due to declines in two of the bloc's major markets. In France and Italy, new vehicle registrations fell more than 10% on the year. And that is something that can be reflected, of course, also in the performance of auto giant Stellantis, which owns major brands in both countries, Fiat in Italy and Renault and Peugeot in France. Now, in the third quarter of this year, Stellantis sales tumbled 27% due to steep declines in both Europe and the US. And the group was forced to reduce its annual guidance. And here in Germany, the situation was slightly better last month. New vehicle registrations rose 0.5% on the year, but that couldn't have done much to help car makers. Now, all of Germany's auto giants, Volkswagen, Daimler Chrysler, BMW and Porsche have had to revise and adjust their guidances for this year.
From the industry next year.
2025 may be, well, of course, a bumpy year for European car makers. Most players are already trying to cut costs and reduce production capacity, so there may very well be more job cut announcements to come. And if that does happen, the industry's woes may increasingly become a political issue. Now, take Volkswagen, for instance. The German federal state of Lower Saxony is a major shareholder in the company, and that means it also has a say in its future. And state representatives have already said that they are not ready to support significant job cuts as part of cost-cutting measures. And in Italy, Stellantis and the Italian government had a row for months over how to deal with the auto giant's ongoing challenges there. Rome accused the company of neglecting Italian production sites and moving production abroad. And this week, Stellantis announced a plan to invest 2 billion euros in Italy. So Europe's auto industry's future is, of course, also a political issue.
Chiponda Chimbelu, thank you. In sports, India to host Para-Athletics World Championship next year for the first time in the national capital, New Delhi. The 2025 Para-Athletics World Championships, the world's largest single para-sport event, will be held from September 26th to October 5th. The New Delhi event will mark the 12th edition of the championships and the fourth time it is hosted in Asia. It took place in Doha in 2015, Dubai in 2019 and Kobe in 2024. In addition, the Indian capital will also host World Para-Athletics Grand Prix for the first time from 11th to 13th March, again next year. And the newly crowned world chess champion D. Gukesh will participate in the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour, which is set to take place in Germany from 7th to 14th February. The 18-year-old Indian will face two former world champions, that is Magnus Carlsen and Vishwanathan Anand. Gukesh also participated in freestyle event in February this year. He clinched the title from defending champion Ding Lorraine in the final game of the World Championship match in Singapore. Australia have dropped Nathan McSweeney after 3 tests and included teenager Sam Constas into the squad for the 4th test against India. This is starting on December 26th. Constas has been scoring runs for fun in the first-class cricket this season, including a century against an Indian team in the tour match. 19-year-old also became the youngest player to score a half-century in the Big Bash League this week on his debut. Wicketkeeper batsman Josh English and all-rounder Bo Webster also remain in the squad. Jai Richardson and Sean Abbott are in the squad as cover for Josh Hazelwood. Scott Boland is expected to take the injured fast bowler's place in the playing 11. And the Fredkin Group has completed the takeover of the Everton as the Farhad Moshiri's Blue Heaven Holdings sold its nearly 94% stake. The Fredkin Group, which also owns Serie A side AS Roma, reached an agreement over the sale terms in September. Mark Watts, the club's incoming executive chairman, said on the club's website, and I quote, "Today marks a momentous and proud occasion for the Fredkin Group as we become custodians of the iconic football club. We are committed to leading Everton into an exciting new era, both on and off the pitch." Unquote. And before we close, a gentle reminder, India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati has recently launched Waves, entering the field of OTT platform. Waves provides a complete infotainment ecosystem to digital media and OTT audiences. If you want great content for free, download Waves today. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan this QR code on your screens to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.